श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। वक्रतुण्डमहाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभः निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां भिषजे भवरोगिणां विधेयेन्द्रो विद्यानां श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयति गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवं। व्यासाय विष्णुरूपाय व्यासरूपाय विष्णवे नमो वै ब्रह्मदेहे वासिष्ठाय नमो नमः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणे स्वयं व्यासेन कृतितां पुराणमलिनां मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीमष्टादशाध्यायिनी अम्बा त्वामनसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवेद्वेषिणी। नारायणपरो व्यक्तादण्डमव्यक्तसम्भवम् अण्डस्यान्तस्तु मे लोका सप्तद्वीपा च मेदिनी। अवतीर्णश्च कालट्यां केदारेन्तरहृदश्च चतुष्पीठप्रतिष्ठाता जगदा जेताज्जङ्करो गुरुः शङ्कारूपेण मच्चित्तं पङ्कीकृतमुबोध्य किङ्करीससामाया शङ्कराचार्यमाश्रये. So we were looking at Arjuna Vishada Yoga. In that, Arjuna was explaining the ill effects of war, what could happen, right? So with the men, the elderly men of the house destroyed, it could result in women leaving their duties and their dharma, and that could result in Varna Sankara, right? Illegitimate children. And through that, dharma will get destroyed in the family and in the community, right? So we looked at how that happens. So when this cross varna, brahmana, kshatriya, shudra, or shudra, vaishya, or anything like that happens, the child that's born cannot follow its own duty, right? So if you look at all the, so we've seen in the Mahabharata stories, we've seen many times, right? So what is Brahmana's duty, Kshatriya's duty, Vaishya's duty, and Shudra's duty, dharma, right? So every dharma is dependent on what varna one belongs. If there is a cross in intermingling of varnas and the child born because of that, what duties that person will follow, and then their children and second generation, third generation, like this, it completely goes away. And that's what in today's world kind of thing what we are seeing, right? So we don't know what varna one belongs, and because of that, dharma is not known to what one should follow. We just majority just randomly follow what everybody else is doing, right? So it's not clear, it's not defined, and that's what Arjuna saying when he says Varna Sankara. That's what it means, and that's destroyed. So effectively, we became part of that. We became the root cause. We became the cause of such a situation where this entire dharma get destroyed. And because of that, he says, Yadimam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanaya dhartarashtra rade hanyus tanme kshemadaram bhavet. If a battle takes place, if I'm even not holding bow and arrows, if Duryodhana and his people come and kill me, that itself is beneficial to me, because I have come here preparing for a battle, and that itself is a sin. To kill all these people and get into such a sinful action, for that, as a expiation, as a prayaschitta for that, if I get killed by these Dhritarashtra's sons, that's going to be beneficial for me. And saying this, what Arjuna does is what Sanjaya narrates next. So that's what we're looking. The last shloka in the first chapter, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, which is the 47th shloka, where Sanjaya Uvacha, Yuvakta Arjuna Sankhe Ratopasto Pavishad, Visrujya Sacharam Chapam Shokasam Vignamanasah. So saying this, Sanjaya says, Arjuna saying all those things to Krishna. What happens? Sanjaya narrates, he says that having said so, Arjuna, with his mind afflicted with sorrow, sat down on the chariot in the middle of that battle, casting aside his bow and arrows. So Arjuna sat there. So that's the meaning. So now just look at the words here, word by word. Sanjaya Uvacha, that means Sanjaya said, Evam Mukta, speaking thus, Arjuna, that means Arjuna, Sankhe, that means in the battlefield, Ratha Upaste, on the chariot, Upavishat, sat down, sat, Visrajya, casting aside, Ta Sasharam, that means along with arrows, Chapam, that means bow, Shoka, with grief, Samvigna, means distressed, Manasa, mind. So previously standing on that chariot, observing all the people assembled there and coming to that war and observing everybody, Arjuna, whose mind, Manas, was afflicted, some vigna, okay, whose mind was afflicted by shoka, by sorrow, right, by grief. What did he do? Ratha upaste. So he sat down on that chariot. Okay, so he sat down on that chariot. Sankhe in the middle of that battlefield. How did he sat down? Visrijya Sasharam Chapam. So leaving his bow and weapon aside, on the side, he sat down. So Sanjay narrates that this is what happened. So after after saying all this, Arjuna, with so much grief, he sat down, leaving his bow and arrows, everything to the side. He sat down. So that concludes this chapter. So first chapter concludes. So as the conclusion, we see that this at the end of every Bhagavad chapter, we see that Om Tatsaditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Krishna Sri Krishna Arjuna Samhade. Here Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama Pratamodhyaya. So normally when one is doing Parayana, Iti is not pronounced, and similarly Adhyaya is not said. So it's normally Om Swasti Sri Bhagavad Gita Shu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama Pratamaha. That's what it said. Okay, so we don't say Pratamodhyaya, it said Pratamaha. So that concludes the first chapter. So here again, if you look at this little bit more in detail, it says Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishads. So it's called as Upanishad. Okay. So why Upanishad? Because this Bhagavad Gita is Veda's summary. Why is that? Because Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata itself is equivalent to Veda, right? So Skanda Purana, for example, says Bharatam Panchamam Veda. So it is the fifth Veda. Mahabharata is the fifth Veda. And Bhagavad Gita in that Mahabharata is a Upanishad. It's a summary of that Mahabharata, everything that's said. And again, if you look at other Puranas, also call Mahabharata as the fifth Veda, right? So it is that summary of the entire Mahabharata, what's said, and that's why it is a Upanishad, summary of that Veda. And again, normally, when we say Gitas are normally called as a neuter sex, right? So Dapamsakalinga, like Gitam in Sanskrit. But we don't say Bhagavad Gitam, right? So we call it as Bhagavad Gita. That means in feminine gender, we call it, right? So feminine gender, we call it Strilinga, we call it. So Gita, because it's a Upanishad, that's why it's called Gita, not Gitam. Bhagavad Gitam, we don't say it, it's Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita Shu. So here again, if you look at this, Bhagavad Gita Shu, right? So if you look at that, there's a Bahuvachana, so plural. So why it is plural? Because there are multiple Upanishads included. Many, the shlokas themselves are, each one of them is considered as a Upanishad. That's why it's called Bhagavad Gita. That means multiple. There is a plural of Upanishads in this Bhagavad Gita. Then Brahma Vidyayam. So again, Vidya is the knowledge, Brahma is Paramatma, Parabrahma. So this Bhagavad Gita gives the knowledge of Paramatma. Yoga Shastra. So it is the Shastra, scripture about yogas. What yogas we come across here? Karma Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, many yogas, right? Ashtanga yogas, all those yogas come here. And then we look at the word also here, Samvade. That means Samvada is a discussion. Okay, it's a both sides talking and having a meaningful discussion. It is not purely and just an ordinary vada. Vada is just an argument. Okay, so one person trying to win something. Okay, there are different types of vada. We will come to that later in this Bhagavad Gita explanation when we go to Shankaracharya's Bhashya. But so we don't. This is not just Krishna arguing his case and this is the right thing, and nobody, Arjuna could not question him or challenge him or anything, right? So this is samvada. This is a meaningful discussion that took place between Krishna and Arjuna. So that's why we call it Upanishad. So Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Krishna Arjuna Samhade Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama Pratamaha. So Arjuna Vishada, Arjuna's despondency, Arjuna's grief, Arjuna's sorrow. Okay, so that's the name of this first chapter. So here again, the first chapter broadly, if you look, and to about 10 shlokas of the second chapter, we don't get into much of this Atma Jnana related discussions. Okay, it's mainly based on the Smritis, the what is right, what is wrong. So we looked at many Dharma Shastras here, right? So what Manusmriti says or Vachishta Dharma Shastra, Yajnavalkya Smriti says, all those things came through the first 47 chapters as we were discussing. Right? And also it explains the background of what is the rules and Shastras, scriptures, Smritis say about this. So that's what covered in the first chapter. So just to recap on what happened in the first chapter, we started with Dharmakshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta Yusvaha, Mamaka, Pandavaschaiva, Kimakurvata Sanjaya. So Dhritarashtra asking in that Dharmakshetra, Kurukshetra, what did my sons and Pandavas assembling there, all of them eager to battle, what did they do, Sanjaya? So he asked that. So that's the first shloka, right? So that's the Dhritarashtra's shloka, only one shloka in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, entire 700 shloka, Dhritarashtra get only one shloka. Then Sanjaya narrates the course of the war, right? So Društva tu Pandavanikam Vyudam Duryodhanastada Acharyam Upasangamya Raja Vachanam Abravit. So second shloka, that's what Sanjaya says, right? Immediately after looking Pandavas Vyudam, that Sainya, that army, Duryodhana, what he did? Acharyam Upasangamya. He come to his teacher Drona and then Vachanam Abravit, he said this speech, he made this speech, right? So we looked at what that speech is, which is Duryodhana addressing Drona, right? He says Pashyatam Pandaputranam Acharyam Hadim Chamum, from that third shloka till 11th shloka where he says Bhishma Meva Bhirakshantu Bhavanta Sarvayevahi. Okay, from third shloka where he says, look, Acharya, all this viewed, this Mahati Chamum, this large army Pandavas have accumulated, and then he explains, introduces all of them on Pandava's side, and then he says all of them are Maharathis, but also look on our side who is here, right? So that Duryodhana's fear was very clear when we looked at those shlokas from 3 to 11. His fear looking at the Pandavas army was very clear, and he introduces everybody on his side, and then at the end of that 11th shloka, we looked at him saying that Bhishma Meva Abhirakshantu Bhavanta Sarvayevi. All of you protect Bhishma. That path that coming to Bhishma, protect it, right? So that's what Duryodhana addresses Drona, and he says. Then we looked at both armies becoming ready to battle, right? So when Duryodhana says, Bhishma Veva Virakshantu, everyone will protect Bhishma. Bhishma get very annoyed, right? So he thinks I'm not capable of this, and he says, then we start in the 12th shloka, right? Tasya sanjana harsham kurviddam pradamaha simmanadam vinadyoche shankam dadno pradapavan. So to make everyone happy, what Bhishma did, simmanadam vinadyoche shankam dadno pradapavan. He did like a lion roar. He did blew his punch, his shanka, right? His conch shell. Then all the Pandavas, all the Kauravas blew their musical instrument, Shanka and everything, and then Pandavas also blew, right? So Arjuna, Rishikesha, Krishna blew his Panchajanya, Arjuna with Devadatta, Yudhishthira, Nakula, Bhima, Sahadeva, Kashi Raja, Drupada, everybody, all of them blew one after another, Pratak, right? We heard of one after another. They blew their conch shells and musical instruments one after another, and that what did it do? In the 19th shloka, we learned that Saghosho Datarashtra Mridhyani Vidarayat Navascha Pratvim Cheva Tumulo Vinanadayan. So that sound, it started shaking the hearts of all the Dhritarashtra's sons, right? So Hridayani Vidarayat. So it did, and it also made huge sound and started shaking sky and earth. That such a huge sound came out. So that's the preparation of the armies from both sides. Then we looked at Arjuna surveying the enemy, right? So in the 19th shloka, starting with that, we look at Atha Vyavasthitam Drishta Dhartarashtan Kapidhuja. So we start with that side. So looking at all those Dhritarashtra sons, Arjuna, he says, ask Krishna to Senayor Ubiyor Madhye Ratam Stapayam Arjuna. Right? So he says, so take this chariot in between two armies so I can see everybody. And then from then, after looking all of them, his relatives, brothers, cousins, children, his sons and grandsons and everybody that assembled there, friends and all those people, gurus, elders, everybody assembled there, he becomes very sad. And then Kripaya Paraya Vishta Vishidan Nadamabhravid. So in the 28th shloka, we look at Arjuna saying these things, right? His Vishada, his Shoka, his grief, he's explaining. He says, Tasman Naharam Vayam Hantum Dhartarashtan Bandhavan Sajanam he Khatam Hatva Sukiram Syamamadava. In the 37th shloka, we look at this, right? Killing all these people, what sukha, what happiness I'm going to get? So he explains he does not want kingdom or anything. So because nothing is going to get from that war, even though eager to war, he might get a temporary pleasure for a second, but when he reflects on it, he's going to be sad only because he killed all his elders and relatives and everybody. And then he also, Arjuna explains the grief at the evils of war, right? So he explains all the things that evil things that can happen because of the war, and then he concludes saying that Edimam apratikaram shastram shastrapaniya dhartarashtra rene hanyas tanme kshemadram bhavet. So even if Duryodhana comes and kills me when I am not holding bow and arrow, that itself is better for me than taking part in this battle, in this war, right? So Arjuna says that. So with that, Sanjay concludes saying that Eva Mukta Arjuna Sankerato Pastupavishad Visardha Shiram Chapam Shokasang Vignamanasa. So he sat down on that chariot. Visarjam Sasharam Chapam Shokasam Vignamanasa. So with grief, relinquishing his bow and arrows, he sat down on that, right? So that concludes the first chapter. Again, one interesting thing to here observe is Sanjay, he says, Ratopasta Upavishat, right? He sat down on the chariot. When we look at most of Bhagavad Gita posters these days where Krishna and Arjuna with a army in the background and kind of red color skies and all these kind of things we see, where they are somewhere on the ground, right? So most of the photos and posters and whatever you see Bhagavad Gita, if you search Google Bhagavad Gita images, you see Krishna Arjuna somewhere on the ground, a chariot in the background, and then at distance we see the armies and red color skies and all those kind of things, right? But here in actually in Mahabharata it says Ratopastopasha. They did not get down, Arjuna did not get down of the chariot and walk a little bit further away, and then Krishna went and thing. He sat down with Vishada, with Shoka in his chariot itself. He was standing when he was telling about when he was observing both sides of the army, and then describing about what he was going to get from this battle if he participates, and then describing about the evils of such a battle, such a war. After saying all that, when he was standing, while saying all those things, he was standing, and then he sat down on that chariot. So we can only conclude that the Gita narration from Krishna happened while Arjuna was sitting on that chariot. Okay, so they did not walk around after that, and he was sitting there. So that's concludes the first chapter. So we will start the second chapter now. Before we go to second chapter, any questions? Okay, that's good. I don't know whether everybody clear or completely lost, but we'll start. Okay, second chapter in Bhagavad Gita is called Sankhya Yoga. Okay, so Sankhya again means in a normal language, Sankhya is used as a numerical thing, right? So numerology, but it is not that Sankhya in Vedanta terms. Sankhya means Jnana Nishta, Sthita Prajna. That means one having Shuddha Atma Tattva Vijnanam Sankyam Iti Vidhiyate. So one having pure Atma Jnana, knowledge of Atma, that is called Sankhya. So Shuddha Atma Tattva Jnana Vijnanam Sankyam Iti Vidhiyate. So that's what Sankhya means from a Vedanta point of view, and that's what we will look in this chapter. So again, in the last chapter, in the first chapter, we looked at Arjuna sitting down, relinquishing his bow and arrows and things, and he sat down, and Dhritarashtra listening to this might be thinking, what happened then? Did Arjuna leave the battlefield? Did Pandava get defeated? And all those things. Thinking about that, so Sanjaya then starts narrating. Okay, Sanjaya continues his narration, and he says, okay, so you can all see, right? Second chapter.
Yes.
So Sanjaya, we look at the second chapter now. So Sanjaya Uvacha Tam Tata Kripaya Vishtam Vishtam Ashrupurna Kulekshanam Vishidantamidam Vakya Uvacha Madhusudana. So Sanjaya said, to him who had been thus filled with pity, whose eyes were filled with tears and showed distress, and who was sorrowing, Madhusudana uttered these words. So that's what Sanjaya says. Sanjaya Uvacha means Sanjaya said. Tam means to him, that is to Arjuna. Tatha means thus. Kripaya means with pity. Avistam means overwhelmed. Ashrupurna means full of tears. Akula means distressed. Ikshanam means eyes. Vishidantam means grief stricken. Idam means these. Vakyam is words. Uvacha means said. Madhusudana is Krishna, the one who killed Madhu. So we look at here. So kripa, that is with pity, is a pity is a kind of tenderness that springs from bewilderment in the form of these are mine. Okay, so that's the pity. And here what we'll start is Arjuna, as Sanjay starts narrating, we look at Arjuna's weakness, that this Vishada he had. That's being, that weakness is condemned by Bhagavan Krishna. Okay, so that's what we see. The pity here, what we are looking is Arjuna's having that these are mine, that kind of thing, and avistam means filled with, he is overwhelmed by that pity, which is spontaneous. Okay, and by speaking again Arjuna as a object and pity as an agent, here it shows that that pity is a kind of accidental, and it's that accidental nature of that pity is not something that's accepted here. Again, to him that there was vishidantam, that is sorrowing. So again, by saying to him who was therefore sorrowing, vishidantam, vishada again here is distressed as a state of mind, which again goes by the name sorrow, right? So because it's caused by apprehension of death of one's own people, who are objects of love, right? So it's the Arjuna's love for them is there, and because thinking that they are going to die, that sorrow comes in him. And again, to him that who want to, the person who has got that kind of sorrow here, by the use of the word vishada in an objective sense, and Arjuna as a nominative case, again it shows that the sorrow is not native to Arjuna. It is the external influence that is bringing that kind of sorrow in him, and hence to him, that tam is used the word here, to him whose eyes were filled. So Ikshana's eyes, whose eyes were filled with tears, Ashrupurna. Okay, so whose eyes were filled and showed with distress. Distress is akula. So his eyes were filled with distress, and his uh, is showed with distress. Again, eyes had become incapable of seeing, right? So he could not see anything owing to that pity, that in his eyes all he could see was these are mine. Okay, his eye, he was blinded from a Vedantic sense. When you look at it, he was kind of blinded, not because of tears alone, but his knowledge is blinded by the thought of these are mine. Okay, these are going to die, and with that sorrow his eyes were blinded. And to that Arjuna, who had become depressed by such a pity and sorrow, which had grown in magnitude, and again leading to what's explained here as Ashrupurna, shedding of those tears, and a state of being distressed, and in that akula, where the word akula is used, and again in the state of being distressed, Krishna says, okay, Krishna uvacha uttered these words, idam. So these words uttered these words, idam vakyam, these reasonable words. Again, Krishna did not ignore him when Arjuna started crying and expressed those sorrow. Krishna did not ignore him. He uttered these reasonable words, and what those words is said in the next shloka. Again, Krishna is addressed here as Madhusudana. That means he is the punisher of the wicked. So, right? So he is the one killed Madhu, and that's why he's known as Madhusudana. And here again, he is punisher of Arjuna in this state, in this sorrowful and distressed state, which is by for him in that state of Arjuna is because of him thinking that these are mine. That ajnana in his eyes, that's blinding him, and for that is addressed as here Sanjaya uses the word Madhusudana. So he's addresses that, and Sanjaya introduces that Bhagavan's words in the next shloka. So that second shloka. So second shloka, here we look at it as Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Kutastva Kashmalamidam Vishame Samuvasthitam Anaryajustam Aswargyam Akirtikaram Arjuna. So Bhagavan says, "O Arjuna, this perilous place, in this perilous place, whereas this come to you, this impurity entertained by unenlightenment persons, and which does not lead to heaven, and which brings infamy." So which removes your fame. So what that means, again, word by word. So if you look at the meanings, say Bhagavan Uvacha, say Bhagavan said, Kuta means where from, Tva to you, Kashmalam means this delusion, this weakness, this impurity, filth. So Kashmala is normally used as a impurity or filth, right? So here again, impurity, filth means not suddenly his body became filth or impure or dress became impure. It's his mind, it's his thinking, okay, that became impure. So that delusion that is there, that's what Kashmalam. Idam means this, Vishame, in this hour of peril, in this crisis point, in this important time juncture, Samavastidam, overcome, and Anarya, crude person. We'll look at the Anarya meaning when we go into a little bit more in detail with Bhashya, Srimad Susan Saraswati Bhashya. Justam means practiced. Aswargam means the one that does not lead to Swarga. Okay, so and Akirtikaram. Kirti is fame, right? So Akirti is disgrace, infame, and infamy. So that Akirtikaram, that the one that leads to such a thing, and Arjuna is Arjuna's name. So when we look at this, again here, this statement starts with Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, and it is not Krishna Uvacha. Okay. Why it is Bhagavan? Again, it goes back to why it's called Bhagavad Gita. I think I mentioned in the very beginning, right? So when we're looking at introduction of Bhagavad Gita. So in this Gita, we had Dhritarashtra name, Dhritarashtra saying only one shloka, right? Sanjay has total 42 shlokas, Arjuna has 84, and Krishna has 574 shlokas. So Krishna is the majority, and then it is Bhagavan's words that's in this Gita, that's main. And that's why it could be called as Bhagavad Gita, right? It's and also Bhagavan, the meaning of Bhagavan again means Bhaga Asya Asiti Bhagavan. So where Bhaga exists, that's him is called Bhagavan. And similarly, if you are looking Devi, Bhagavati, Bhaga Asya Asiti Bhagavati. Okay. So the root word is Bhaga. Bhaga means what? Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti Shabdate. So that's in Bhagavata Purana. It says Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Paramatmeti, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti Shabdate. So the Parabrahma is called Bhagavan. So that's what Bhagavata Purana says. So Bhaga is the root word. Again, Bhaga has many different meanings. And if you look at Bhaga, Bhaga is one among the Adityas, right? So among 12 Adityas, Bhaga is one of them. Bhaga also means wealth. It means beauty. It means excellence. It means prosperity, happiness, and also it means Jananendriya. Okay, so all these many other different meanings are there for Bhaga. So and Sri Madhusudana Saraswati in his Bhashya, he introduces he quotes from Vishnu Purana. Okay, so he says that Bhagavan is the one who of all the divine glories, virtue, fame, beauty, detachment, liberation, all this in full, all this having as a technical name for all those six things one having is Bhaga. And one is used as a somebody who having those as a external eternal position, one having that eternal position, those things is one suffix is added to that Bhaga. That's why it's called Bhagavan. So he uses Vishnu Purana Shloka where it says Aishwaryasya Samagrasya Dharmasya Yashasaha Shriyaha Vairagyasya Mokshasya Shannam Bhaga Iting. So here again Srimad Saraswati in his word in his Bhashya, he says that we have to use Samagrasya, that means in full, to all these things. What are those? Aishwaryasya, Dharmasya, Yashasaha, Shriyaha, Vairagya, Moksha. Okay, so all these things we have to use Samagrasya. That means he has in full Aishwaryas. Aishwarya is the ownership of things, right? So the one who has in full ownership of everything, that's the one as Bhagavan. And Dharmasya. Okay, so one is as Dharma in full. And then Yashasa. So Viryasya. So Aishwarya Samagras Dharmasya Yashasa Shriya. So Virya, again, Viryasya means the one who is controlling everything, one containing everything, one assigning, allocating everything. And then Yashasa Samagrasya. So one is completely success. Complete success is you are praised in all the Vedas, and it's all in the sounds. It's just such a success one having. And then Shriya, one is having complete Saundarya, beauty. And then Jnana. Okay, so one having complete knowledge, one is Sarvajna. And then Vairagya, one is having detachment from everything. And Moksha, one is giving the liberation, enlightenment. So having all this in full, each one of them in full, that's Bhagavan. So, okay, so Srimad Saraswati uses this Vishnu Purana Shloka there. And also he uses the second shloka again from Vishnu Purana, which says that Utpattincha Vinashancha Bhutanam Agatim Gatim Veti Vidyam Avidyam Cha Sa Vachyo Bhagavaniti. Okay, so the one is called Bhagavan, who knows the origin and destruction and gain, loss and enlightenment and ignorance of the creatures. That's the meaning of that. So he is the one called Bhagavan. Okay, because he is here of all the creatures is to be connected with each again. So the creatures, all of this is to be created. So whether it is creation or destruction or a gain or a loss or enlightenment or ignorance of the creatures is depends is the one who knows all those things is called Bhagavan. The word again, origin, destruction, everything suggests that their cause as well. So the creation, destruction, everything happens because of Bhagavan. Again, gain, loss is used again. Future prosperity or misfortune, everything happens because of Bhagavan. So that's why this is the kind of meaning the word Bhagavan is applicable, and that's applicable only to Vasudeva. Vasudeva, Krishna, Narayana himself can be called as Bhagavan, and that's why it's used as Bhagavan. Again, these days we use Bhagavan for even many people as well, right? So, but again, you have to remember, so the Bhagavan means it's having Aishwaryasya, Samagrasya, Dharmasya, Yashasa, Shriya, Vairagya, Moksha, all these things, right? So all those things one has, that person could be called as Bhagavan. We'll look at this shloka again, what Bhagavan said and those kind of things next time. I will take a pause there. Any questions for today?